If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this. Serious, what's the most unexplainable thing that's ever happened to you at night? Back in college, I lived in a dorm for a few months. The second floor was for female students, first floor was for male students. There was also a common area in the first floor. All the rooms had the same layout, 4 bunk beds, but the lower bunk is actually a desk and a cabinet. So there are 4 people per room with a tiny desk space under their beds. Anyway, one night, I had this dream that there was a lady wearing black on the foot of my bed watching me sleep. When I woke up, I figured, oh, sleep paralysis. But then 1 week later, I had the same exact dream. I shoved it off again and thought maybe sleep paralysis and I was sleeping on the same exact spot in the same exact position. I tried to shove it off. Fast forward to a few days later, me and some people were hanging out in the common area. One of our male dorm mates walks in and tells us a story about this weird dream he had about a lady in black watching him sleep. I almost jumped out of my seat when his story matched my dream. I've never told anyone about my creepy dream. But the creepiest part? 5 other people had the same exact dream. So yeah, I fucking snuggled my roommate that night and left that dorm building after 3 weeks. Lots of weird creepy shit happening there. This happened about 5 or 6 years ago. My boyfriend was at school and my roommate was at work. It was really rare that I had the apartment to myself like that. Now, I love singing, but I get shy around others. I took the opportunity to put my headphones on and sing a bit. About 10 minutes into it, I heard a voice in my left ear loudly and clearly say, "Keep singing." The thing that sent chills down my spine was that it sounded exactly like a friend of ours who had committed suicide a year before, and whose guitar my roommate had in his room. I tried replaying the song to see if maybe it was some sort of sample added to the YouTube video to mess with people, but I didn't hear it again. I noped the fuck out of there for the rest of the night. It was in July 12 years ago, I remember that clearly. I was home alone, my stepfather was out for some beers. Now for some background, my mom, my sisters and I had already believed that this house was haunted, and for a year I happened to live there only with my stepfather who never was actually there. That night, it was already past midnight. I was forcing myself to go downstairs, brush my teeth and go to sleep. But for some unknown reason, those stairs at night always scared the shit out of me. I just didn't feel comfortable there. Well, at 1 a.m. I finally decided to go, used bathroom and rushed back. When I was opening the door to my room, I saw as someone ran behind my back up the stairs to the room next to mine. It gave me a mini heart attack, I screamed, then realized it was probably my stepfather going to sleep. So I went to that room to tell him how he scared me and to wish a good night. I peeked in and it was empty. But if anyone got in, he couldn't go out without being spotted. So I was scared, grabbed the phone and called a friend who I knew will be still up. We talked until 3 a.m, I managed to calm down and suddenly my friend said, "See, you can go to sleep, your dad is home already." I said yes, I just see him from the window coming back, but how do you know? Swear he was not kidding me, he's not such a dick, but he replied, "You've got to be kidding. I just heard some male voice talking there." I didn't hear anything and was still alone, locked in my room. I have 2 stories. They're not great, but they're still unusual things that I can't quite write off as normal. Oddly enough, both happened within about the past year. The first strange thing I saw was at about this time last year in rural Indiana. I was driving home from my ex-girlfriend's late at night and I saw a deer off the side of the road. Except, it wasn't a deer. It was really dark out, so I couldn't see perfectly, but there were things about the creature that I could make out. First, its eyes glowed yellow like a deer's, but they continued glowing even when my headlights weren't shining on it. It also stood on its back 2 legs at about 8 feet tall. It sort of bounced when it walked, too. Its silhouette was fuzzy. It kind of faded out of existence and sort of appeared like TV static, I guess. When I slowed down to take a look at it, I didn't feel incredibly afraid, but I did feel as though I was witnessing something that I wasn't supposed to. I have been told this creature was a Wendigo, but I'm not sure I believe all that. The second strange thing to happen to me was while I was unloading my car one night and talking on the phone to my buddy Dave. All of a sudden, something that looked like a meteor appeared just above the tree line, streaked across the sky, and disappeared after like 2 seconds. It was incredibly bright and fast, and I was quite surprised that it didn't actually set any of the trees on fire or crash into the ground or something. I thought it was cool that I saw my first UFO, but it wasn't. Anytime I went to sleep over the next 48 hours, including naps, I'd have restless dreams about being held in a room and issued threats by something about what would happen if I told anyone about them. Then, when I'd wake up with piercing stomach pains. I initially thought my appendix was bursting, but they went away a couple hours after I woke up. Thankfully, this stopped after 2 days, but it was kinda scary for a while. At an old rental house I had unexplainable experiences. One night when I was alone, I was sitting in the back room which was at the end of a long hallway. I was on the computer surfing the net and I heard what sounded like a woman sobbing, and a muffled howl. I can only describe it as the sounds of a mother having just lost her child. The sound could be heard over my headphones, so I put them on mute. I could still hear it. I quickly opened a window and I couldn't hear a thing, it wasn't outside. I walked to the door of the room I was in and opened it, facing the long hallway. I heard it. I checked the rest of the house but could not locate the sound. It almost felt like the sound was following me from a distance. I checked all the rooms and locked all the doors. The crying noise had stopped. I went back to my computer but before I could even put my headphones on I heard the crying again. I jumped up and ran to the door but before I could open it I heard deep pounding footsteps going away from the door down the hallway. I get goosebumps every time I think of it. I opened the door and there was nothing. The house was empty. All windows locked, all doors locked and shut. I moved out not long after. Driving through a road in the Big Island of Hawaii. It was heading down to Cape Au from Pahoa, near where that blister of a fissure is now. Anyways, it's like mid-70s outside, and I have my windows down. All of a sudden the inside of the rental gets cold. I'm talking ice cold to the point where I can see my breath and I shudder. My windows fog up to the point where I can't even see the road in less than 5 seconds and I slow down big time. And in less than another 5 seconds the air temperature returns to normal, the windows defog just as quickly, and I'm on my merry way. To this day whenever I visit the Big Island I just get weirded out at the thought of driving down that road at night again. One night around 2 to 3 years ago, me and my friend were driving out to another friend's house, who lived about 15 minutes out of town. As we were driving through a relatively steep, foggy, and windy part of the road, my friend has to swerve out of the way to avoid hitting a person walking with a lampshade over their head. This was around 11 p.m., in the pitch black of night, and in the fog. This was 10 miles from the closest town and several hundred yards from the closest house. This person was walking with a deliberate pace, and didn't react to the bright lights or sounds of the car. We were probably sophomores in high school, and were so freaked out. We just kept driving. We tell the story a lot, and I'm afraid people don't believe us because it doesn't seem that likely. I was at a resort in a place called Whispering Palms in Nigeria. This was the 90s. I was about 6 years old, but it's something I've never forgotten. My family of 5 and I were all in our hotel room in the evening. It had started raining or really windy, something like that, but it was our reason we all came in. I remember watching TV with my sister while my mom and aunt were in the bathroom doing makeup. They had the door open and music was playing, so it was lively. My dad decided to step out to get something, and when he did the power went out. Although this is common in Nigeria, NEPA, Google it. The direction to watch the TV was the same as the bathroom, so I could see my mom and aunt, and when the power went out I looked over to their direction. They both were still in there doing WE it was, but through the darkness I noticed a rising looming figure beside them. It was almost like a shadow, but it pierced through the darkness and continued to get bigger. I was unsure of what I was looking at, and I guess you can say I was petrified because I was unable to say anything. I couldn't look at my sister who had been laying next to me. All I remember being able to do for the first few seconds was hope in my mind that my mom would notice it too. I then remember screaming, crying and pointing in their direction in the darkness. My mom and aunt ran over to me in the darkness unknowing that I was actually pointing at something in their direction. But when I told them, they then looked too and screamed also. My aunt carried me and we were all standing on top of the bed screaming and praying. The rising looming figure had now taken shape, and this is in pitch black that we could see this thing. We were all screaming standing on top of the bed. We couldn't run out, we were all scared, and the image of something I can't even describe or name till this day just stood there, like a guard or something. All this is in pitch blackness. Eventually the door to the room opens, the power comes back on, and my dad walks in and looks at us. We look at him, and look in the bathroom to see nothing. Everything seemingly went back to normal. I remember us being pinned to that position for several minutes watching it, up until my dad came in and power came back on. When I was really young, maybe around 4 or so, I was sleeping on the bottom bunk of me and my brother's bunk bed. Back then I would wake up pretty often throughout the night, and almost every time I woke up I would check to see if my brother was awake because I was usually bored and nosy. One night I woke up and went to check if my brother was awake. First I checked to see if I could see him from the side that wasn't against the wall. I couldn't see him. So I went to switch sides and I tried to smoosh my face against the wall and see if I could see him through the crack of the top bunk and the wall. When I looked up there I saw him up against the wall not moving, so I assumed he was asleep. As I went back to the middle of the bed though, I saw what looked like a bat wing reach up from under the bed through the crack between the wall and my bed. I scooted back as it flapped a few times. I remember it sounded like a tent flapping in the wind. After flapping a few times, it went back under the bed. I was frozen for a bit, but after a few seconds I took my blanket, my pillow, stuffed animals, anything I could find, and shoved it in the crack between the bed and the wall. After I covered every inch of the crack, I went back to sleep. For years later I would get as many stuffed animals as I could and shove them into the crack before I went to bed. I have no idea what happened. Maybe I was dreaming, but it felt pretty real and affected me for a pretty long time after, so who knows. I'm going to try to do this story justice. A very small bit of background: my sister and I are very close, even though we are close to a decade apart in age. We went through some stuff together, including a few odd experiences, and we can talk about anything, and do. We were staying at my grandma's house down south. This house is weird. You have to walk through bedrooms to get to other bedrooms. And specifically, you have to walk through grandma's room to get to the bathroom, so you really have to limit your trips. We were in the room adjacent to grandma's, with a door on the wall at the foot of the bed to her room, and a door to the hall sort of straight ahead when you sit up in bed. Then there's a fireplace on the other wall. We're talking, quietly, after a trip together to the loo. We are in a queen bed, so sitting, laying next to each other. I'm a big reader, so I have a book, and the nightstand and lamp is next to me. We suddenly see this dark figure in the corner between the fireplace and hall door walls. It's just standing there, slightly taller than a human, with what looks to be a hood and cloak, but there wasn't any detail, just darkness, so it's hard to say. But pitch black and very defined. So what do? Immediately turn off the light and go to sleep, of course. Now, I'm a scaredy cat, so I hesitate to turn off the light in an unfamiliar place even when I don't see a giant cloaked shadow monster in the corner. There was no commenting, no good nights. We didn't speak about it for almost 2 years, when suddenly, one of us said, "Do you remember that weird dark figure?" Holy shit. At grandma's. Why have we never talked about this? And we still don't know why. We both remember the same figure, same placement. Only she remembers seeing legs and I don't. And then we went to sleep in the dark. This happened to me a few weeks ago. Backstory: my parents had been talking to this woman who claimed she could talk to spirits. She's supposedly a Mexican bruja, witch, who knows certain spells and stuff like that. I was and am still skeptical. I lived next door to my parents, and she had apparently done this weird exorcism thing late in the evening where everyone in my family had paranormal experiences and heard little girls and saw shadows move. They swear by this experience as proof. I didn't know they did this. Around 11 p.m., I took my dog out for a walk. I usually walk her to the end of the block past my parents' house and turn around. So it was dark that night and I was feeling creeped out like I usually do, but nothing out of the ordinary. I walked to the end of the block and turned around to walk back. The second I walked in front of my parents' fence, I smelled candles and burning incense like from a Catholic church. It creeped me out, but I smelled it at my apartment also. My wife was awake and she smelled it too the second I opened the door. Her first concern was whether my parents' house was on fire. So I gave my sister a call. Apparently they had no candles lit and smelled it outside also. She was basically creeped out and didn't want to talk to me too much about it, which I kinda understood. So the next morning I went over to talk to them about it, and they explained that they did their little exorcism thing at like 10:45 p.m. and that the witch lady had said this weird prayer where she basically enlisted the help of spirits that were carrying candles and incense around the property at around 11 p.m. Their explanation was that I was probably walking next to some ghost carrying the candles. Now, I'm skeptical, but holy shit. I can explain away ghosts and spirits and stuff like that. I cannot explain the smell of church at 11 p.m. in front of my parents' house in a tiny California town when no one else was out. The one I remember most is probably when I was about 6 or 7. I liked to lay on the floor looking into the living room area, which I could see easily since this was a mobile home. Sometime late at night I remember waking up and looking into the living room, seeing my parents' chairs, and in my dad's chair I could see a person sitting, but they appeared as a shadow that looked darker than the darkness of the room. It looked like a person reading a newspaper, but as the pages turned no sound could be heard. As soon as the shadowy person noticed I was looking at it, I remember it suddenly coming at me very quickly. Not sure why this memory stuck out so well over the years, and I'm pretty sure it was a dream, as I tend to have always had strange things like this happen my whole life when I'm asleep, now 37 BTW. About 2 years ago I heard a person's voice say my name that sounded convincing enough that I went outside to check for anyone, though I was 90% sure it was just a dream, since hearing loud noises or voices is fairly common, but still weird to this day to have these things happen. It's hard to know if it's just me hearing it in my own head or if someone is actually around. It's so common at this point that I'm not even scared of hearing sounds that wake me up. Also, when in a dream state where I'm in the dark, usually it will be a replica of my house now, only incredibly dark. I somehow trained myself to run around wildly through the house looking for things that try to scare me so I can beat the crap out of it. Not sure how this has happened, but most dreams where I'm stuck in the dream now turn out with me attacking the darkness and not scared at all, though I don't feel like I know I'm in a dream. Near the end of 5th grade, I was trying to sleep one night. I was still pretty afraid of the dark back then, and so I slept with the covers over my head almost every night. It was way too hot out though, so I figured it couldn't hurt to lift the covers just a little tiny bit, but as soon as I did, I saw white fangs right in front of me and a very loud hissing noise. Immediately pulled the covers back over my head, and until I finally somehow managed to fall asleep, I heard a rocking chair creaking back and forth all night, and it sounded very close by. I know for a fact that there were no cats in my room that night, and we didn't even have a rocking chair. There have also been a ton of instances in my whole life where I'll be almost asleep, or maybe just have my eyes closed for a few seconds, and out of the darkness in my eyelids or whatever, a vision of some of the scariest faces I've ever seen in my life rapidly form right in front of me and jolt me up, making me pant really hard, sweating. The weirdest thing is, I can't even picture faces as scary as the ones that randomly appear if I tried. They just have to come out of nowhere and surprise me, and I can't even trigger them myself. I've tried. One time, I was about to fall asleep, and I saw some old guy smiling at me. We chatted with each other a little bit, and he smiled at me and warmly said, "I'm expecting great things from you." Then, in like 1 second flat, this seemingly kind, warm old guy suddenly morphed into this freaky, red demon with a devilish grin and one of the scariest faces I've ever seen. I can't even remember exactly what most of these faces look like, either. Just that they're terrifying, plus some small/basic details about them. Also, when close to falling asleep, I sometimes hear random voices saying random things, almost as if some people are having a conversation right next to my ears. I have several. One time around 2003 I was in my bedroom with my dog, RIP, at the end of the bed. I had my door open so I could see the hallway. I'm just laying there when both my dog and I see this dark shadow run through the hallway into the bathroom. My dog was barking, and this being 2003, I said, "What the hell?" So as I opened the door to the bathroom it slammed in my face, and when I opened it there was nothing. I believe I had sleep paralysis this time. I was having this dream of me being a nurse in the 50s, and this nurse was this lady that was killing her patients. She was overweight, had dark hair, piercing green eyes, and red lipstick. She wanted me to help her and I said no. She chased me. When I woke up she was right on top of me. This woman was massive and I couldn't move. I could only shut my eyes. This one is more recent. A few years ago I'm walking toward the bathroom. As I pass the hallway my brother's room is opened and I glanced. There was a tall figure there. This guy was massive, like 6 feet 8 inches. He had a flannel shirt, jeans, typical lumberjack apparel. I only saw him from the back for a quick moment. When I relieved myself I realized my brother is nowhere near that tall. Then whatever was there obviously disappeared. Fast forward to last year, my brother saw this exact guy. I never told him about what I saw because I just thought I imagined it. Anyway, again I'm in the bathroom when he sees this scary huge guy. We have a mirror in the living room and he saw this lumberjack guy right next to him through the mirror. He said he was just staring at him. When he glanced over to his shoulder he didn't see anything. When I got out of the bathroom my brother told me what he had seen and I went pale. His description matched mine up to a T. Basically, I was walking my dog at night once and I saw a giant, I mean truly gigantic, wolf/coyote animal about maybe 100 feet away from me. It was a giant silvery coated canine, and it was so huge that it was nosing around the inside of a large outdoor trash can while still standing on all fours. I'd say it was probably 4 feet or so at the shoulders. Then, I quickly shut off my phone and looked down for a second to put it in my pocket, and when I looked back up it was completely gone. It was a well-lit suburban main street, almost no traffic, bright street lights. Clear weather. I was not drinking or high. I looked right at it and I'll never forget it. I have no idea what it was. It was probably almost the size of a compact car, like a Honda Fit or a Prius C. About ruined my pants. It was around 10 years ago. I was lying in bed at night and thinking about something school related. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I clearly thought, okay, I want to sign if, something school related here, and a landline phone started ringing. Stopped when my whole family, my parents and my brother, woke up to pick it up. The display didn't show any number, but you could clearly see that it lit up in the darkness when it was ringing. I thought to myself, nah, that's a coincidence. I want something else, and at that exact moment we all heard something, like a shampoo bottle, falling into the bathtub in the bathroom we all were standing next to. We checked what it was, but there was nothing in the bathtub and everything was in its place. Just strange stuff. The other night at around 4 a.m. the smoke detector in my bedroom went off for about 5 seconds and then shut off. Was definitely that there's smoke sound and not the dead battery sound, since it hasn't done it since. Neither my BF or I can figure that one out. As far as paranormal / creepy stuff, once just after coming home from college for, I think, summer break, I was in my room unpacking some things. I lived with only my grandpa and my dog. It was around midnight or 1 a.m. My grandpa had gone to bed about an hour earlier and the dog was laying on my bed asleep. For some reason I had the TV on, but I had it muted, so it was pretty quiet, which I don't like because that house has always creeped the shit out of me. I'd had previous unexplained experiences happen in that house, all but one happened in my room. Mostly hearing voices say my name or call out hello. Occasionally the voice would sound like my mom or my grandpa calling me from another room. After this incident the TV would often turn itself on while I was sleeping. I thought I was just forgetting to turn it off at night until one time my grandpa called me while I was away at school asking me what was wrong with my TV because he kept noticing that it would be turned on whenever he walked by my room for several days in a row. I always feel like I'm being watched in that house. Anyway, as I was putting stuff in my dresser I hear a very, very distant voice shouting help. My dog must have heard it too because she's now awake and alert, staring out into the dark hallway from the foot of the bed. Now, my dresser was right next to a large window that was pretty close to the street even though it was on the side of the house. I stop what I'm doing and just stand there for a minute. Then I hear help. Help! Again in what sound like a crying / scared little girl's voice, but it's super distant sounding, so I go into alert mode thinking somebody's kid is outside running down the street looking for help. I look out the window but I can't get a good view of the street, so I hurriedly run outside. But there's no one out there. It's dead as silent. Most of the neighborhood is asleep and there's not a car or a person to be seen. So I headed back inside, thoroughly freaked the fuck out, and immediately start texting my best friend to tell her what happened, and because I'm scared out of my mind and need someone to calm me down. I ended up placing a line of salt at my doorway and drawing some random ass protection rune I found online on my door and sat there with the door shut with all my lights on and watched TV until sunrise. I still hate staying at that house. My theory is there's some spirit there that doesn't like it when I leave for extended periods of time, possibly a child that has become emotionally attached to me. Most of the incidents happened when I had just come back from being away at school, or right after I had left for school. Never the time in between. Like a kid throwing a tantrum to get what they want. There was a period of time when I first moved into that room that things would happen, but now it's nearly always when I've been gone for a long time. I took several AP classes my senior year of high school and consequently had a fair share of late nights. I wouldn't often walk around on my front lawn to get some air after sitting at a desk for 2 to 3 hours. During one of these nights, a woman in a hoodie approached me. Granted, I had waved at her, just to be polite, asked for my name and where I lived, and then offered me cigarettes and weed. I gave her a fake name and address. We were closer to the curb and there are no sidewalks, and went inside when I saw she had turned the corner. Another time that comes to mind is when I got to watch an arrest unfold from my porch. I was about to head inside when I heard a police bullhorn and saw a guy sprinting down the street get mobbed by 5 or 6 cops, with 3 cruisers close behind. So I'm going to do 2 stories, one is something that happened to me and the other is something that happened with my daughter this weekend. The first is pretty long but I think it requires a setup. The first is a time when my parents and I lived in an older rent home. It was built in the late 1800s and had one of those circular floor plans where there was a doorway to the living room, into a formal dining room, into a kitchen, a small hallway with a bathroom, and then another bedroom that opened up to both the outside and the living room. The back of the house had 2 add-ons, one was a laundry room and the other a second bedroom. We knew that something was bizarre about the house because my parents had experienced the sound of a door opening and then stomping going throughout the circle in the center of the house and then a door slam. I had an older dog that wouldn't allow us to go to the back of the house alone. If someone was going to the bathroom he was right there with you, and sometimes he'd just growl and do that gruffing noise at empty rooms. So one summer my dad agreed to take in a friend's 2 teenage sons while she and her new husband went on the road trucking. One was 19, the other was 14, I was 12, and my brother was 13. The 2 sons stayed in the back bedroom and then my brother and I slept in the living room while my parents had the other bedroom with the 3 doors. Due to my parents' giving nature, that back bedroom had almost always been occupied by a friend and no one ever stayed in it more than a month at a time. So after about a week, the younger brother moves into the living room with us because his brother is being an asshole, and then he eventually goes to stay with his dad for the rest of the summer. The older brother continues to get more and more angry and aggressive, to the point that my dad asks him to pack his shit and leave. After we were cleaning up the back room, my dad found a journal under the bed where the older brother was keeping notes. Essentially, the things he was writing got increasingly more bizarre and angry. My dad burned the book and wouldn't tell us what it said, but I remember eavesdropping on a phone call to the kid's mom that said he drew an illustration about killing my dad and mutilating his body. Anyway, the kid moved out, my parents cleaned the room and decided no more house guests, and then painted it this robin's egg blue color for me to stay in. A few months after I started sleeping in the room, my mom and I were backing out of the driveway to go get my dad from his job. It was around 12:30 a.m. I had turned the lights off and closed the door to my room, but you could see from the window that a lamp was on. Then, you could see the shadow of this tall person with long limbs slowly moving across the window through the curtains. My mom looked at me and asked if my brother was home. I told her no, he was at our grandparents' house. We got the heck out of there and I never slept in that room again. We eventually moved out after a bunch of really random bad things kept happening that culminated with a tree falling on the back half of our house. The second weird thing happened this past Sunday. We were staying with my husband's family in their lake home. The house itself was built by my husband's grandparents to retire in, but they've since passed. Early on, lots of strange things would happen. They'd go to bed with the lights off and they'd wake up with the lamp on. They'd hear knocking at night. My sister-in-law woke up to feeling someone's fingers running through her hair the way a loved one would rub a child's head to comfort them. They've also had vacation renters report seeing a figure standing outside the sliding glass door at night only to find no one there. The house is on a point and it's pretty isolated. The only option to not be seen would be to jump into the water, and then knocking noises. Last year my daughter was about 9 months old and she would coo and track things with her eyes we couldn't see, which was weird but also could just be a baby. She's now 21 months old and is much more vocal. The men in my husband's family all look just alike. My husband looks just like his dad and his dad looks just like his dad. On Sunday night my husband and I put our daughter to bed and stayed up late drinking and talking by the lake. Around 12:30 a.m. we both decided to turn in for the night because toddlers are notorious for waking up early on days you want to sleep in. It had to have been around 2:30 to 3 a.m. when I wake up to my daughter saying no 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 pawpaw, no 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 pawpaw over and over, not crying but more concerned. I nudged my husband because it was weird as hell. She's never woken up at night talking, just crying, and she's never called for anyone but mama. The minute I nudge him and whisper that she's saying no no pawpaw, she stops. I look up just as she's starting to lay back down in her sleeper. My husband's dad went by pawpaw and so did his grandfather. The only thing I can guess is that she saw something that reminded her of her pawpaw but not quite, and that was why she kept saying no no no. I've had weird things happen to me since I was a baby up until a few years ago. Sorry if this gets a little long or is awful. It's my first real Reddit post and I've never actually written this out before. So, my mother told me the stories from when I was a baby and has told me several times without any detail changing. I just can't picture making these same stories up for 28 years. We lived in a 2-story house, all bedrooms upstairs with a baby gate at the top of the stairs. She would occasionally wake up in the middle of the night and hear me crying, but I wouldn't be in my crib. She would follow the cries and find me downstairs sitting in the middle of the living room, not a scratch, baby gate intact. There is absolutely no way I could have climbed over a baby gate, besides getting down 15 stairs safely. When I got a bit older, about 3 to 4, I hit a bedwetting phase. Our rooms were close and she was a light sleeper, so when she heard me stirring in the night she would wait for me to come in to either get in her bed or tell her I need mine changed. One night she heard me getting up but I was taking forever to come in her room. She sat up as she finally heard me come in, and when she looked I was standing in the doorway holding a man's hand looking up at him. She immediately thought some crazy pedo broke in and turned to wake up my dad, who was still asleep beside her. When she turned back to me a second later, I was standing by myself staring at her like nothing happened. When she described the man to my father, he said her description matched the man who had previously owned our house and died there. He had a few unique features, and my dad to this day still doesn't quite believe in ghosts but agrees our house is weird. Odd things happened throughout the time I lived there. I have a few more stories from that house, but they are a bit more tame. When I moved out to go to university, I didn't have any experiences until I moved into a basement apartment of a really old, newly renovated house. Weird stuff started slow. Doors closing on their own, our dryer would turn on by itself, dog barking at nothing. Then one night my roommate and I decided to go to a movie instead of going out with our friends. When we go home it was about midnight, So we each went to our rooms for the night. I couldn't sleep at all and kept tossing and turning. I was facing the wall and went to roll over to get comfortable. When I opened my eyes, there was a woman staring at me at eye level. I was so scared I threw my covers over my face and cried. Too terrified to run or even look from under the blankets, I eventually somehow fell asleep. The most eerie part to me is I kept seeing her, the exact same woman. She always had a white dress and really long dark hair. She always seemed angry or sad. I kept seeing her even after I moved. Every time after the first night, she would be across the room just staring at me, but each time I would see her, she would be closer than the last time. I thought I was crazy until I had a friend sleep over one night, late night study session, and I woke up to her screaming beside me at 4 a.m. She was shaking and crying and told me she woke up and saw a woman watching her. She promptly left in the middle of the night. A month later, my boyfriend at the time woke up and saw her too, standing directly beside the bed. Eventually I opened up about this to a friend who claimed to be able to sense and communicate with spirits. After telling him everything, he seemed uncomfortable with the situation, basically how she kept getting closer, and asked me to have a few minutes alone in my room. That night I saw her for the last time, but it was different. I woke up almost like I was in mid-conversation. I sat up out of a dead sleep and said what? And heard with my own ears tell Kelsey, and never saw her again. My roommate's name was Kelsey. Back in college, my dorm room was on the 4th floor of our dormitory hall. One night there was a power blackout and, in the dark, I heard someone singing opera. Her voice was surreal. We didn't have any singers on the floor, so I assumed someone was playing music through a speaker, but how could they? The power was out. With my cell phone out as a light, I wandered the halls looking for the source of the singing. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. My roommates were just as weirded out, and we knocked on everyone's doors and asked if they heard it too. The lights came on, and the singing stopped abruptly. The next day, we asked around and everyone had heard it too. Nobody would fess up to being an omnipresent opera singer. Still don't know why someone would sing to a 4-story dorm in a power outage, but it still stayed with me till now. I have an entity that follows me, but the worst thing happened right when I was about to go to bed. My fire alarm in my room beeped a couple times like the battery was dead. My dog was shaking and looking at the alarm. I called her a chicken and laid down. I then watched my dog watch and move her head from the fire alarm to the side of my room, then above my bed right between me and her. I noped out and slept on the couch. I work overnight shifts in a care facility, and there are a lot of weird noises at night. Frequently I'll hear what sounds like someone walking down the halls with keys on their hip jingling and never be able to find the source of the noise. Also, I can still occasionally hear the voice of a lady who passed away a few months ago. Her dementia had gotten so bad that she spent her last few days panicked and screaming. I still hear her. The most creepy to me though is that I've correctly predicted several deaths. Thankfully, none of them have happened overnight when I'm alone. Several times now I have left work saying, "Resident is probably going to pass this morning," to find out a few hours later I was right. If that's my superpower, I would very much like to trade it in. Probably my mind playing tricks on me, but definitely had my heart racing. I work night shift, so I came home from work around 7:15 a.m. I'm in the kitchen eating something quickly, and I'm the only one downstairs. I put on YouTube and start watching a video until I felt as if someone was behind me. I then see what looked like a shadow growing larger, as if someone is trying to sneak behind me and try scare me. At this point I'm thinking my nephew or brother is trying to scare me. I turn around and no one was there.